Sunday. It is March 1st, 2026. I mean, can you believe we are already sliding into March?
Yeah, time really flies when you're watching the future of medicine rewrite itself in real time, right?
It really does. And speaking of rewriting the future, today we are tackling a topic that feels like it's been, building up for the last few years.
Absolutely.
Because we all remember when AlphaFold hit the scene a few years back, it felt like absolute magic. Suddenly, we could predict the shape of proteins just from their genetic code.
It was a massive leap forward. I mean, it essentially solved the structure prediction problem for things we had seen before. It was the end of the beginning, so to speak.
Right, but here is the thing, and this is really the crux of our deep dive today for you listening at home. Knowing the shape of a protein is great, but it isn't a cure.
No, not at all.
To actually cure a disease, you need to design a drug that attaches to that protein, and often in ways we have literally never seen before. And apparently that is where AI has been hitting a bit of a wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We call it the generalization wall, because it's one thing for an AI to predict a structure that looks exactly like the data it was trained on.
Right.
But it's an entirely different beast to predict how a drug interacts with a protein when the physics or the chemistry is completely novel.
Yeah.
When it's out of distribution.
Out of distribution. So today we are looking at two breakthrough papers that claim to just smash right through that generalization wall.
We are.
We've got the heavy hitter, Isomorphic Labs, releasing details on their new IsoDDE. That's the drug design engine. And then we've got a really fascinating paper from CAST and LG AI Research on a generative system called MolHIT.
And the mission today is to see how these two distinct technologies move us from just guessing biological shapes to actually engineering cures with a level of precision we honestly haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Because they are attacking the problem from opposite sides.
Yeah.
IsoDDE is fixing our understanding of the biology, and MolHIT is fixing how we design the chemistry.
Let's start with the big one, then. IsoDDE from Isomorphic Labs. They're claiming this isn't just like a minor upgrade to AlphaFold 3. It's a whole new ballgame when it comes to molecular interactions.
It is. And to understand why this matters so much to you, we have to look at that generalization gap I mentioned earlier. Because the paper admits something, quite candidly.
Oh, what's that?
Previous models, even the mighty AlphaFold 3, often just memorize binding modes.
And memorize, like a student just cramming for a test.
Precisely. If the AI had seen a similar drug binding to a similar protein in its massive training data, it nailed it. It was just interpolating.
Okay.
But if you gave it a target from totally unexplored molecular space, new physics, new chemistry, it often failed completely. The paper actually cites failure rates of over 50% in antibody-antigen docking when things got tricky.
Wow. Over 50%. That is basically a coin flip. Not exactly what you want when you're designing a billion-dollar drug.
No, not at all. So IsoDDE introduces a unified computational system designed specifically to fix this. And the headline stat here, the really big one, comes from a benchmark called Runs and Poses.
Runs and Poses. I love that. Sounds like a classic rock cover band.
It really does. But it's actually an incredibly rigorous stress test for these AI models. They looked specifically at the absolute hardest subset of this benchmark.
The hardest part.
Right. Cases where the protein and the ligand had 0 to 20% similarity to anything in the training data. This is the wild west of biology.
Uncharted territory. So how did IsoDDE actually do?
It more than doubled the accuracy of AlphaFold 3.
Doubled.
Doubled. We are talking about a massive, unprecedented jump in capability. It's proving that the model isn't just matching patterns anymore. It is actively starting to understand the underlying physics.
There was a specific story in the source material that really drove this home for me. The case of the nanobody and the bacterial protein, I think it was PDB-ID9-FZD, for those playing along at home.
Oh, yeah. This is a perfect example of being on the wrong side of the wall.
Walk us through it.
So you have this bacterial protein, OMPA, and it sits right in a cell membrane. It's like a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And you have a nanobody, which is just a small antibody trying to bind to it.
Right.
When they fed this exact scenario into AlphaFold 3, the AI placed the nanobody on the wrong side of the membrane protein.
Wait, like literally physically inside the bacteria instead of outside?
Essentially, yes. It placed it in a location that is physically impossible in a living, breathing biological system. It achieved a DocQ score, which is just how we measure the quality of the prediction of 0.00.
A flat zero, a total failure.
Total failure.
And that's because it didn't understand the physical context, right? It just saw two shapes that kind of fit together like Tetris blocks and smashed them together.
Exactly. It was guessing based on shape matching without understanding the actual biological constraints of a cell membrane. IsoDDE, however, completely nailed it.
Yeah.
It got a DocQ score of 0.943. It put the nanobody exactly where it belongs in reality. That proves it isn't hallucinating a fit. It actually understands the valid physical interaction.
That is a staggering difference. I mean, 0 to near perfect. But fitting the shape is really only step one, isn't it? Because just because a key fits perfectly in a lock doesn't mean it actually turns. You need to know how strongly it binds.
Correct. That concept is called binding affinity. And historically, let me tell you, this has been the absolute bane of computational drug discovery.
Why is that?
To get a good affinity number, you usually have to run these massive, incredibly complex physics-based simulations, like a method called FEP plus free energy perturbation.
Okay.
It's considered the gold standard, but it's incredibly slow and vastly computationally expensive.
It sounds like waiting for a high-res video rendering to finish on a really slow computer.
That's a great way to put it. You simply can't do it for millions of different compounds. It takes too long. IsoDDE, however, predicts that affinity directly.
Directly.
Yes. And according to their data, it actually outperforms FEP Plus on curated sets.
Yeah.
It is bridging the gap to experimental-grade precision, but doing it at AI speeds without the massive overhead of traditional physics simulations.
That sounds like it speeds up the whole testing phase dramatically. But there is another feature in the IsoDDE paper that honestly just blew my mind. The cryptic pockets.
Yes.
Weird.
Cryptic pockets. This is where things get really sci-fi.
Let's unpack this for the listener, because when I hear cryptic pocket, I immediately think of, like, a secret compartment in a spy's trench coat. What is it in the context of biology?
It's actually not far off from that. Imagine a protein as a tightly closed fist. If you look at it in a static snapshot, just a 3D image, there's no place to put a drug. It looks like a solid, impenetrable block.
Right, no keyhole.
Exactly. But in nature, proteins aren't static. They wiggle and breathe and move. Sometimes when a very specific molecule approaches, the protein relaxes and opens up a little cavity, a pocket, just to let that molecule in. That is the cryptic pocket. It's an induced fit.
So it's literally a hidden door that only appears when you knock.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And the massive problem is, traditional software usually looks for pockets on the static, closed fist structure. If the pocket isn't visibly open in that snapshot, the software just says, sorry, this protein is undruggable. Nothing fits here.
But IsoDDE can find them anyway.
It can. And it can do it without even knowing what the key looks like in advance. The paper details this incredible retrospective analysis of a protein called cereblon, or CRBN.
Cereblon. It sounds a bit like a comic book villain, but I know it's a really crucial protein for cellular waste disposal, right?
It is. It's a very important E3 ligase.
Yeah.
Now, remarkably, IsoDDE identified a novel cryptic site on cereblon using only the protein sequence as input.
Wait, just the sequence?
Just the sequence.
Yeah.
It didn't even need to see the folded crystal structure first.
And this wasn't just some theoretical AI hallucination or a guess, right? It actually aligned with physical reality.
No, it wasn't a guess at all. It perfectly matched a very recent scientific discovery from a paper by Dip et al., published in 2026. The AI effectively saw a binding potential that human scientists had missed for years until very, very recently.
That is just wild. So it is actively finding hiding spots for drugs that we didn't even know existed.
And it is doing it significantly better than the existing open source tools. They compared it to a tool called P2Rank, which is kind of a common standard in the field.
Yeah.
IsoDDE significantly outperformed it, specifically in finding these really tricky, shape-shifting cryptic pockets.
Okay, so if IsoDDE gives us the lock, even a completely hidden shape-shifting lock, we still actually need to design the key. We need to draw the molecule that fits into that pocket perfectly. And I think that brings us to the second paper for today, MolHIT.
Right, moving from the complex biology to the complex chemistry.
Exactly. This paper, which comes from KAST and LG AI research, talks about a real dilemma in designing molecules, a paradox between validity and novelty. Can you explain that tension for us? Because usually you want both of those things.
You absolutely do want both.
Yeah.
But in generative AI for chemistry, they have historically been completely at odds. Broadly speaking, there have been two main ways to use AI to design molecules. The first way is treating molecules like text.
Text.
Yeah, 1D strings of characters. They're known as SMILES codes.
So it's like literally typing out a chemical formula on a keyboard.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
And since AI is very, very good at language, these 1D text models are great at writing valid chemical sentences. The molecules they make strictly follow the rules of chemistry, so you get high validity.
That sounds good. What's the catch?
The problem is they are incredibly boring.
Boring how? Like they just lack imagination.
Exactly. They tend to just memorize what they have already seen in the training data. So they'll give you 50 slight variations of Tylenol when what you actually need is a completely novel cure for a brand new virus.
Right.
They have a low novelty. They're very risk averse.
Okay, so that is the 1D text approach. Safe but stale. So what is the alternative?
The alternative is 2D graph models. Think of this like drawing the molecule out on a whiteboard, plotting atoms, and then physically drawing the connections, the bonds between them. These models, specifically ones called discrete diffusion models, are fantastic at exploring new, wild ideas. They have incredibly high novelty,
But I'm sensing a but here.
but they make absolute junk,
Junk.
chemical nonsense.
Yeah.
They often draw connections that are chemically, physically impossible in the real world.
Right.
They might try to connect 5 bonds to a carbon atom, and carbon can only take 4, period.
Ah.
So you get very high novelty, but terrible low validity.
So you basically have to choose. You either get a boring molecule that actually works and exists, or a super creative novel molecule that just explodes or simply cannot exist outside the computer.
That was the painful trade-off until MolHIT came along.
MolHIT. And it stands for, well, actually, the name comes from the underlying framework, doesn't it?
Yes, it's based on their new framework,
Yeah.
the Hierarchical Discrete Diffusion Model, or HDDM.
Right. So how does MolHIT actually solve this paradox? How is it getting the best of both worlds?
By fundamentally changing how it draws the molecule. See, previous graph models tried to just guess the specific atom type directly from static noise. They tried to draw the whole detailed picture all at once.
Okay.
MolHIT uses a coarse-to-fine approach.
Walk us through that coarse-to-fine idea. What does that look like?
Imagine you are an architect designing a new building.
Huh.
You don't start your very first day by laying a single brick or, picking out the brass doorknobs.
No, you'd start with a blueprint.
Right. You start with a sketch of the massing. Is this a residential building or commercial? How big is the footprint? That broad stroke is the core stage.
Okay, so getting the vibe right first.
Yeah.
Establishing the macro structure.
Exactly. MolHIT has these specific hierarchy levels. First is S2, which is the masked state, basically the blank canvas. Then S1 is the mid-level state. Here, it just decides the broad chemical groups or the general properties of the atom, not the specific atom itself. And then finally, S0 is the final specific atom choice. By getting that mid-level right first, it ensures the final structure actually makes strict chemical sense.
It builds a scaffold of logic before it ever fills in the fine details.
Perfectly put. But they didn't just stop there. They also realized that existing graph models were, quite frankly, chemically illiterate when it came to specific atoms.
Chemically illiterate. What do you mean by that? A carbon atom is a carbon atom, isn't it?
To a high school physics student, maybe. But to a medicinal chemist, absolutely not. A carbon atom sitting in a flat, aromatic ring behaves completely, totally differently than a carbon atom in a flexible open chain.
Oh, I see.
Previous models just treated them as the exact same label, just a C.
Ah, so the AI was entirely missing the context of the atom's role. It saw the player on the field but had no idea what position they were supposed to play.
Yes, that's a great analogy. So MolHIT introduces something called Decoupled atom encoding, or DAE. It splits the atoms up based on their specific functional role. It constantly asks, is this aromatic? Is this charged?
You know, the paper had a really specific technical example of this that stood out, the pyrrolic nitrogen.
Yes, the NH motif. This is a specific nitrogen atom sitting inside a 5-sided ring, and it is incredibly crucial for a ton of modern drugs. Old graph models really struggled to generate this because they just saw the label nitrogen and didn't understand the specific geometry and the protonation state that the ring required.
So they would just draw it wrong.
Constantly. They draw it wrong constantly.
And MolHIT.
Because DAE explicitly encodes those specific chemical roles, MolHIT's reconstruction of these complex atoms is near perfect. It knows that this specific nitrogen needs to behave in this specific way because of the exact ring it is sitting inside.
And the validity numbers from the paper really reflect that accuracy, don't they?
They absolutely do. On the Moses benchmark, which is basically the gold standard for testing this stuff, MolHIT achieved a 99.1% validity.
Wow.
That is just unheard of for a graph model. It actually beats the 1D sequence models at their own game, the validity game, while keeping all the amazing structural novelty of the 2D graph approach.
That really is the holy grail, then. You get the wild creativity of the graph model, but the strict rule following of the language model.
Exactly. It creates a completely new Pareto frontier in AI drug design.
So let's zoom out for a second and put these two puzzle pieces together for you listening. We have IsoDDE, understanding the biology, finding the locks, identifying the hidden pockets, calculating the percent's affinity.
Right.
And then we have MolHIT acting as the master architect for the chemistry, drawing these highly valid, highly novel molecules. How do these apply to the real world right now? What are the actual wins?
Well, let's look at the specific wins they highlight in the papers. For MolHIT, they really focus on scaffold extension.
Scaffold extension, what is that in practical terms?
It is a very, very common task in pharma. You have a starting piece of a drug, a scaffold that you already know works safely, but you need to grow it or extend it to make it fit a new target better.
Like adding an extension to a...
Right. MolHIT can take that existing scaffold and finish building the molecule with significantly higher hit at 1 and hit at 5 rates than previous state-of-the-art models like digress. It is basically like an autocomplete for drug design that actually deeply understands chemistry.
Autocomplete for drugs, that's incredible. And what about for IsoDDE? What's the big real-world win there?
The massive win there is in antibody design. We talked about the nanobody earlier, but broadly speaking, IsoDDE effectively unlocks 22% to 37% more of the novel antibody design space.
That is a massive number. That's a third more potential treatments that were previously completely invisible to our best modeling tools.
It is huge. Think about the diseases where we have historically really struggled to find a foothold. Often it is precisely because the targets are difficult, they have cryptic pockets, or they're these complex membrane proteins. IsoDDE finally allows us to map those difficult targets with real confidence.
It really feels like we are officially moving from the era of AI as a tool to AI as a partner.
I would actually go a step further than that. We are moving from AI that memorizes to AI that understands.
Yeah.
IsoDDE genuinely understands the physics of binding. That is exactly why it doesn't put the nanobody inside the bacteria anymore. And MolHIT respects the strict rules of chemistry. That is why it doesn't draw impossible chemical bonds.
It is closing the loop. You have the target identification side and the molecular generation side, both reaching a level of maturity where they can actually just feed into each other reliably.
And that reliability is the key to everything. If you can truly trust the affinity prediction from IsoDDE, you don't need to run 1,000 wildly expensive wet lab experiments. You can run 10.
Right.
And if you trust the chemical validity of MolHIT, you don't need to synthesize 1,000 compounds just to find one that is stable. You can synthesize 50.
So it is efficiency, but it's also pure capability.
Right.
We are actively tackling targets we used to call undruggable.
The term undruggable is rapidly becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
Honestly, it really just meant we aren't smart enough or our tools aren't sharp enough to find the pocket yet.
Yeah.
But with tools that can literally see cryptic pockets based on a sequence alone, the number of undruggable targets drops significantly overnight.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We are sitting here in March 2026. What does this actually change for the future?
It means the entire pipeline of medicine is about to change shape. We aren't just going to see more drugs. We're going to see fundamentally different kinds of drugs.
Like what?
Drugs that work on allosteric sites, those hidden cryptic pockets rather than just trying to jam through the main front door of a protein.
Like what?
Drugs that are designed with complex novel geometries that human chemists might literally never have sketched out on a napkin.
It is a brave new world.
It really is.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. We talked about cereblon earlier and how IsoDDE found a pocket that experimentalists, brilliant people with electron microscopes and crystals, hadn't clearly defined until very, very recently.
Right. The AI predicted it from the raw code before the
Yeah.
physical confirmation was widespread.
So here's the thought I want you to mull over. If IsoDDE can find binding pockets that experimentalists haven't even seen yet, and if it can predict binding affinities better than our best physical physics simulations, are we approaching a point where the simulation is actually more revealing than the physical snapshot of a microscope?
That is the big provocative question right now. We have always historically treated the physical experiment as the ground truth and the computer model as just a rough approximation.
Always.
But physical experiments have noise. Crystal structures are frozen in time. They aren't dynamic living things. If the AI is modeling the dynamic living physics better than our static frozen snapshots can capture it,
Then the AI actually becomes the ground truth.
it forces us to completely rethink what scientific proof looks like. And with tools like MolHIT, we finally ready to trust the AI to be the lead architect of our medicines. Not just the intern assistant filling in the blanks, but the actual lead architect holding the pen.
I think we might be a lot closer to that reality than we think.
Based on the data in these two papers, I would say we are already aggressively dipping our toes in that water.
A truly fascinating deep dive today. As always, thank you so much for guiding us through the heavy science and making it accessible.
Always a pleasure to be here.
And to you, our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.